What's up guys, Sean here, and today we're going to talk about whether or not swatting can constitute a murder charge. Before we delve into the topic at hand, I have to make two quick points. So I've actually been asked more than a few times what my opinion is on the whole Logan, Japan suicide thing. And honestly, I don't see the controversy. The Wolverine came out in 2013, and the fact that one of the first scenes in the movie depicts Japanese soldiers committing suicide should offend nobody. I mean, honestly, you guys really should be more offended by the 20-foot tall CGI Silver Samurai that appeared at the end of the film. It should boggle your mind that Silver Samurai in this film wasn't even an actual mutant. Ridiculous. Alright, so now that we've gotten the super insensitive stuff out of the way, I want to talk about the reaction to my last video where I broke down the case. So last time I broke down a case, it was the Michelle Carter case, which if you click the I in the corner of your screen, you can watch that video for full context. And a lot of the comments that I got in response to that were really pointless. Like, normally I read your comments and I try and listen to your criticism and end up concluding that I'm right after a few moments of thought. But this video, the comments were particularly bad. And the reason for that is that a lot of people did not understand what I was trying to do in that video and what I'm going to try and do in this video. What I'm going to do is take the information that is presented and match it up against the letter of the law. And if it turns out, like it did in the Michelle Carter case, that the alleged crime is nowhere connected to the language of the law that they were convicted on, I'm going to point that out as a nonsense conviction. And I don't really care if you still feel like she did something bad. It's not about whether or not she did something right or wrong. Obviously she was a terrible person who did something awful, but she was not guilty of the crime that she was convicted on, because it was an absurd conviction that flies in the face of rule of law. The reason this channel has its original name is because it's about actual justice, not social justice, which means rule of law and due process, not feelings and emotions. I have no problem with criticism or differing opinions, but if you're not going to stick to the facts of the case, then why even comment on a video that's specifically about that? Alright, now that I'm done with my little sermon, we're going to move on to the actual case. A little over a week ago, 28-year-old Andrew Finch was killed in a SWAT raid in his home. Police received a phone call allegedly from somebody being held hostage in the home that their parents were shot and they were hiding and they needed police assistance immediately. The police in Wichita took that information, which they had no reason to distrust, and responded based on the perceived danger of the people in the home. Unfortunately for 28-year-old Andrew Finch and the Wichita police, this was a prank phone call and they ended up killing somebody who had done nothing wrong. These type of prank phone calls are unfortunately connected to gaming, and they're called swatting. Swatting is where one player in an online game gets angry and calls the local police of their opponent and tells them about an incident occurring in their opponent's home. And the incident is not a domestic disturbance or anything like that. It's a serious situation that would bring forth a SWAT team. Now, in this particular case, the suspect was in California, and Andrew Finch wasn't even the right person. So the police ended up raiding somebody who was completely disconnected from the situation and ending their life. Now, for some unfortunate reason, a lot of people tend to think that swatting is a joke. And as somebody who's actually been on the receiving end of a situation like this, I can tell you that it is not funny in any way, shape, or form. When I was growing up, I had a neighbor that absolutely hated me, and he would consistently call the police in my area as a means to harass me. This included accusing me of breaking into his home, reporting me to an anonymous tip line about a nearby fire, and calling an anonymous tip line saying that a fugitive was hiding out in my apartment. This went on for years, and I'm very fortunate that none of these situations turned out to be violent, but it's really scary to have the police come into your home once, let alone time after time after time. So if you're one of those people who think swatting is a joke, do me a favor, hit the unsubscribe button. If you follow me on Twitter, unfollow me on Twitter, and just forget I exist. I mean, let's think about how awful this situation is. It wouldn't have been okay if he had actually given the right person's address and that person ended up dead, but this person was completely disconnected from the scenario. So even if you think it's okay to target somebody who curses at you or beats you in a game, which is ridiculous by the way, This guy wasn't even that person. Also, you managed to completely destroy the life or lives of multiple Wichita police officers. I mean, could you live with yourself if you were the person who pulled the trigger during a prank? I mean, he's on administrative leave as they investigate the shooting, but there's a very good chance that he's never going to be a cop again, and he really did nothing wrong in this scenario. He reacted to the information that he was given. But because some jerk-off thought that this would be an acceptable response to a freaking gaming issue, there's a very good chance that his life and his career are completely over. And if you needed any more proof that the suspect in this case was complete and utter garbage, he has already been convicted for reportedly making over 20 similar phone calls in the past. Except in those cases, he was calling in bomb threats to local schools in California. Now, he's convicted in 2016, and he should have been in jail for at least 3 years. But he was released in half that time because California lets out non-violent offenders in half the time due to prison overcrowdedness. And by the way, this just goes to show you that the term non-violent offender is a completely arbitrary and garbage term. The term that we should actually be worried about in our criminal justice system is victimless crimes. Identity theft is a non-violent crime, but an identity thief can ruin the lives of multiple people. By contrast, drug possession is a victimless crime, so I think victimless crimes should be let out of jail early or never even serve a day in jail. But non-violent crimes, if they're serious like this, they should serve out the full sentence. Like, bomb threats is not a joke. But anyway, that's not really what we're here to determine. The state of Kansas has actually charged this suspect with murder, and we're going to determine whether or not murder fits. Now, I'm going to be perfectly honest. At first glance, the reason I wanted to cover this story is because I did not think a murder charge would fit. I had laid out a scenario how basically murder is about premeditation, and if this was murder, then the police officer himself would have had to have been the murder weapon, which doesn't make a lot of sense. I had built up some counter arguments about how if he would have done this call, the police would have burst in, but nobody would have gotten hurt. They wouldn't really have charged him with attempted murder. They would have charged him with a false police report, which, by the way, based on the evidence, clearly guilty of a false police report. I was going to pitch you guys a manslaughter charge, maybe an involuntary manslaughter charge. But then I remembered one key component of every case, and that's the jurisdiction that the case takes place in. He has actually been extradited to the state of Kansas, so Kansas state law is what's paramount here. So what we're going to touch on first is the voluntary manslaughter charge. Voluntary manslaughter. Intentionally killing a human being upon a sudden quarrel or in the heat of passion, or upon an unreasonable but honest belief that the circumstances existed to justify deadly force. Now, if we're being perfectly honest, the voluntary manslaughter charge does not fit this case. It has to do with intentionally killing somebody in the heat of passion. Now, we can argue that maybe he made the phone call in the heat of passion, but I don't really think that this case fits into the voluntary manslaughter category. Now, of course, just because one charge doesn't fit does not mean that he's not necessarily guilty under another charge. So I decided to go against my prejudgment and look through the other murder charges, and clearly capital murder, not a fit. First degree murder, not a fit, not even worth getting into. But then I looked at the second degree murder charge. And second degree murder in the state of Kansas reads as follows. Killing a human being intentionally or unintentionally, but recklessly under circumstances manifesting an extreme indifference to the value of human life. Now, honestly, when reading this, I was a little shocked. This is pretty atypical for a murder charge. But to me, this charge actually fits pretty well with what he did. For me, we're not having a conversation in any way, shape, or form about whether or not he intended for this guy to die. I'm not a mind reader, you're not a mind reader, and calling the police to raid somebody's house is not a clear-cut way to get them killed. That's just not factually a fit. However, calling a false SWAT report and sending the police to somebody's house definitely shows a reckless indifference for human life. Which is why, to my surprise, this is not a case of prosecutorial overreach. The charge of second-degree murder fits perfectly with the crime, as there is nothing in the second-degree murder charge that says that he has to be there, pull the trigger, or even be present in that situation. It's just that his reckless indifference to human life can be grounds for a second-degree murder charge. Look, the reason I think doing these videos are important is because a lot of people don't understand the law, and they think that if they feel a certain way about an issue, then the police and the prosecutors should respond according to the way that they feel and not according to the letter of the law. And typically that feeling, coupled with the fact that prosecutors are elected officials, causes prosecutors to make some really shitty decisions that honestly negatively impact all of us. Because when the rule of law is violated and charges are filed on a whim, that affects everyone in a negative way. While this story is really sad and it personally upsets me, I'm really glad that this is not one of those cases of prosecutorial overreach. the charges actually fit the crime. So to answer the question of the video, swatting is grounds for a murder charge in the state of Kansas. Anyway, that's all I really have for you guys today. Let me know what you think about this situation in the comments. If you like this video, show me by leaving a like, become a patron like these people, subscribe for more content. Till next time.